I'd like to welcome everyone to this workshop. Today is December 9th, 2021. This is an inclusionary zone workshop. As a preliminary matter, I'm Keith Pecos. I'm the chair of the Newbury Planning Board. This workshop is being held to discuss the development of an inclusionary zoning bylaw for the spring town meeting warrant. I would like to take attention if that's we can do that. For planning board members, please just call out a yes when you hear your name. Larry Murphy.
Yes.
Thank you, Larry. George Morse. No. Okay. Leslie Matthews.
Yes.
Woody Knight.
Here.
And I'm not sure if Mary Stone was going to be with us this morning.
I don't believe so.
Okay, great. Town staff, Martha Taylor.
Here.
Beautiful. And Emily Noble.
Here.
Great. This planning board workshop is being conducted remotely, consistent with the act relative to extend certain COVID-19 measures adopted by the state of emergency, which extends the governor's March 12, 2020 order superseding certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law 30A 20 until April 1st of 2022. This order supersedes, it suspends the requirements that open meeting law to have all public in a physical accessible location that allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the Newbury Planning Board is convening by video conference via Zoom as posted on the Planning Board's agenda, which can be found on the town's website, which identifies how the public may join. You may join us by going to http://zoom.us and entering the meeting ID 832-71416. 3056. That is 832-7141356, or by calling 929-205-6099 and entering meeting ID prompted. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by the video and or telephone conference. The purpose of this workshop is basically to discuss the development of an inclusionary zone bylaws for possible inclusion on the spring's ATM warrant and make recommendations to the full board. So this work group will report to the board, and the board will then make its recommendation. The board was working on this previously, but unable to complete it due to the workload and COVID. Now we're looking to move this forward. Newbury, as a community, has a lack of housing diversity, a lack of affordable housing, and currently Newbury only has 3.5% of the 10% required of affordable housing. Development of inclusionary zoning bylaw is a recommendation in the Newbury Housing Planning Production Plan, 2006 Master Plan, and is a current draft of the Master Plan update. So these are goals and directions that our town has been headed in for some time. And so with those kind of opening remarks, that's kind of our reason for convening today and for the board to make its discussion and to hopefully come up with recommendations to the board, to the full board, so that we can present it to the select board. With that said, Martha, I'm going to let you start to steer this a little bit.
All right. And actually, I'm going to turn this over to Emily. She's done quite a bit of research on this. I know that she sent you last week some bylaws from other communities, as well as the state model bylaw. And she's also done a comparison of some of the sort of major features of inclusionary bylaws, such as, what triggers it? Are the developers, are they required to build an affordable unit, or can they contribute funds to the town? There's certain mechanisms that we don't have. We don't really have a mechanism for funding. We don't have a affordable housing trust, nor do we have a housing authority at this point. So I'm going to try to share my screen and turn it over to Emily for a review of the matrix that she's put together of different features. So,
Martha, thank you, Emily.
Scroll up.
Okay.
up to there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Are you able all to see that?
We can, and if you can enlarge it just a touch, it might help some folks.
How's that?
Okay, great.
Scroll up, yeah. Okay, so as Martha said, I just looked at a few different communities in the area of different sizes at their inclusionary zoning bylaw or ordinance, depending on what it is. And so the first thing is what triggers it. So most of them, it's a subdivision or development, and for each community, depending on their size, it was a different amount of units. So West Newbury is 3 or more, Maynard 6 or more, Littleton 6 or more, you know, as we go. The highest was Newton. And then the requirement for the amount of that development or subdivision to be affordable was generally 10%, but Chelmsford was 25% and Newburyport is 12%. And then Newton had a scale because it had 2 different tiers of affordable housing. There was ones that were below 80% of the annual median income, and then a second tier that was above 80% of, or above 80%, but below 110%. So they had, depending on the size of the development, they had different percentages that were required. And there's a table in there in their zoning telling how much of each. And it also, I think, was different depending on if they were providing rental units or if they were providing ownership units. And then, so depending on, so like for West Newbury, if they, as far as the fractions part, you know, if you only have 3 units, 10% of that is only a fraction of a unit. So if the fraction that you got was 8 or 9.8 or 0.9, then they would have to provide a whole unit. But if it was less than that, they could provide a whole unit or provide a payment in lieu. And then it was different in different communities. Only well, a few of them, it didn't matter what the fraction was, they had to be rounded up to a whole unit. But in Maynard, it was, if it was below 5.5%, they could do a payment in lieu. And Newton, if it was below 0.5, they could do a payment. And then as far as how you could provide the affordable units, all of them allow it on site, of course, and then some allowed off site by special permit or with approval of the planning board. Most allowed a payment in lieu. Littleton did not if the development was over 19 units. And Newburyport maybe does not. I may have just missed it in their ordinance, but I didn't see it. And then some allowed a donation of land, or one did, Chelmsford, with approval, and the land had to be able to support 2 times the affordable units required. And then some allowed density bonuses. So if they, it's just by the board's discretion, or in Littleton, it was if they were providing more affordable units, then they would allow a higher density. And also in Newton, they allowed that. And then in Maynard, if the affordable units were affordable to 30 to 60% households earning 30 to 60% of the annual median income, then the planning board could count those units as 1.2 units and then reduce the overall number of units that was required. And then I also spoke about in Newton, the 2 different tiers of affordability, I guess, and how they handled that. And that's it. There's probably some other things, but those are the things that stood out to me in each of those zoning bylaws that I reviewed. And I also sent you a sort of example or a model, a bylaw that I found on, I think it was the MassGov website, sort of, and it was similar, and I'm assuming a lot of these here use that as sort of a starting point.
Wonderful, Emily. Thank you for the matrix. Let me ask you a couple of questions. And Martha, you might have insight on this too. So where we see the tiered levels with Newton, which is a very different community than ours, but they're directly doing 80%, and then was it below 80%?
Yeah, 80 or below.
Where everyone else just allows any of those thresholds to be met?
I think that in general, it's below, it's 80 or below what is considered affordable, Martha. Or what is it?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's what it is.
yeah.
So for all the other ones, the tier 1 is sort of what applies to everyone else.
Okay, all right. And let's see, there's, let me see what other questions board members might have. Larry, what are your thoughts just looking at this this data right now?
Yeah, no, there's a lot to take in, certainly, and Emily did a great job bringing this, putting this all together. One of the things that strikes me, what I did is I just went through the model bylaw and just made notes on the various issues. But one thing that strikes me is it's got to move, it's got to work very closely with the trust. And Emily, if you've looked into it, or Martha, what do the housing trusts typically provide for? I mean, for example, if you take a payment in lieu, can that be donated to a nonprofit to build affordable housing, or does the town have to use that money? You know, those types of questions I think might drive what sort of options we would want to consider in terms of meeting the affordable housing goal from the developer's point of view.
I didn't really look into how, sort of they handled the donation, what they would do with that money. But I did see, but all the communities did have some sort of housing authority or housing trust, which is where the payment would be made to.
Right. So I mean, that's something that we, my larger point is that's something we need to look at the same time as we're looking on this bylaw, because they've got to work hand in glove.
Right. If we're going to allow somebody to make a payment in lieu, we need to have a mechanism for receiving those funds and administering those funds in some way that furthers the development of affordable unit.
Yeah.
And in
same
cases,
thing if we permit a land swap too. I mean, and maybe those options just aren't right for Newbury. I'm not suggesting that they are. It's just something that we need to think about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, right now we just don't have the mechanisms in place, so we need to find out what would be involved.
I was going to say, in some situations, like in Newburyport, their housing trust would review, like if a developer wanted to provide the affordable housing off-site, the housing trust would review that as like it's not just the planning board's decision. They would be involved in that
I see.
as well.
Thanks, Larry. Leslie, do you have any thoughts or questions at this time?
Not at this time.
Thanks, Leslie. Woody.
I was curious about the monies, and I think my questions were answered. On when they say off-site, like what would that mean? Could someone explain it to me? I'm just not sure.
I'm assuming that it means just on a separate development. I don't know if it would be just all affordable, or if they just to have it separate from whatever development of the market rate units that they're building. So just to not have it mixed in, but to have it in a separate development altogether. Martha, did you?
Yeah, I think there's actually, I could be wrong about this, but I think there might have been a situation in Rowley actually where that was done. There was a development, but then affordable housing was done elsewhere.
Okay. That's all I have for questions now. I'm sure I'll have more as we work along.
Thank you, Woody. So is there a way that can we spotlight the board members and still have this up on screen, Martha? Do we have that technology?
One more thing.
Okay.
There's one thing I forgot to add to this list here
Yes.
too. Another method for providing it is that Chelmsford would allow it to be a developer to put the affordable units on town-owned land. So if there's a piece of land that would work for that the town owned, they could put the affordable units there.
Okay.
So Pete, you want me to focus the board members or spotlight?
And can you do that and leave this screen up too? Is that possible? Is that too cumbersome?
Let me see. It's not something that I have done before.
I don't want to goof it up. I just wanted to see folks as we have this discussion, because this is a very helpful tool if we can. Start with screen sharing.
Yeah. Hold on a second. It's not something that I've done before.
Okay. It's okay. If it's too cumbersome, we don't have to do it, Martha.
Wait, hold on. I might be able to. Yeah, I think,
That's okay. So let's, if we can have the ability to let's go to the three board members just so we can have a conversation, kind of see some people's read on this, and then we might have to go back to the screen.
okay. All right, I'll just stop share for now.
Okay. Okay. And let me get back up to switch to. Okay. So let me ask you this question.
Pete, can I interrupt?
You sure can, Larry.
Martha, I have a message on my screen says meeting is in focus mode. Only host and co-host can see your video. Then it says got it. Should I don't think I should be here. Should I hit got it?
Yeah, just hit got it. I think, okay, so right now I'm
Okay.
seeing everybody.
Okay.
But only you and Pete can. Or
Right, Pete, you are a co-host right now, so you're also seeing everybody.
Yep. Okay. Actually, I see everybody. I have everybody on the grid, so I'm okay with that.
Right,
Which is what-
so Woody and Leslie, who are you seeing?
I can,
Martha, Pete, myself, and Emily.
And Woody.
I can see
Technology is
Martha,
wonderful.
Emily, and Peter, and that's it. No Pam Wall, no Fire Tablet, no Leslie.
Okay,
We need to get Leslie in.
And I don't know where Larry went. Oh, there he is.
Oh,
Larry's
my.
fine. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, look at
Leslie,
this.
I got Leslie back now.
All right, we just have to get Woody in there.
I got Woody as a
I've got Woody.
silhouette.
Perfect. Oh my goodness, there we are.
Okay.
You did it,
Avatar,
Martha.
I should
We
say.
spot.
first time.
Well, it's like anything else with with the technology. The more we use it, the more comfortable we get with it. Now, I was going to do the romper room thing. I don't know if anybody remembers romper room. I see.
Yes.
Yeah, with the tennis racket. So, a couple questions. It seems like the doing the trust piece might be a little bit of a process to get to. That's what I'm hearing? Because
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not sure. I mean, I have been to a couple of workshops where, they've talked about setting up an affordable housing trust and setting up a housing authority. There is some expense involved with doing that. It's often done with CPA funds, which we don't have.
Okay.
So, for the time being, perhaps it would make most sense to require that the developer do an affordable unit as opposed to a payment in lieu.
that's where I was going to go with that. Because if we can't do the trust, let's do the next best thing, which is try to get the threshold of affordable units. So, our position would be that would be the the necessary component to take place. Now, if we did that, it looked like Amesbury, West Newbury had, was it 10% that West Newbury had, Emily?
Yes,
And
10%.
and who had 25%? Was it Chelmsford?
Chelmsford, yeah.
Okay, and in West Newbury was 4 units. The threshold was 3 units or more, and Chelmsford was a much higher threshold, right?
It was 4 or more for Chelmsford.
Oh, okay. So, if we had the threshold activated at 4, okay, yeah, I'm just thinking about infrastructure and all that it takes, for a developer to do this. And if our threshold, if we're trying to actually make numbers work, and we did 25%, that would be 1 unit, if I did my math correctly, because I like to keep it very simple. So out of every 4 units being developed, 1 would therefore be. I have to ignore something. Decline. When you have all this eye technology talking to one another, when one person does something, it affects everybody else. So I apologize. A phone call came in. So if we did go with 4 units and our threshold was 25%, one of the 4 units would then be an affordable unit. And if the margin was the 80% of the
median income.
Yes, we're starting on the road. We're starting that process. We have the option of decreasing that from 80% to 60%, but at least would allow the avenue to begin. So let's talk about that kind of model that I just threw out there. Larry.
Yeah, no, I see where you're going, and I think it's the right direction. We do have to think about a mechanism, though, for dealing with fractional interest, especially if we're not going to have a housing trust. So, for example, suppose it's a 5 unit subdivision. The West Newbury model, I believe, calls for in the case of a fractional unit, for a payment in lieu into the housing trust, which again, we're kind of taking off the table at this point. So we need to think about, say, for example, in a 5 unit development, do we round down, do we round up? I'm not saying that that these are insurmountable problems, just things we need to think about.
Yeah, in terms of rounding down, rounding up. So if it's a fraction that's less than a half, rounding down, or more than a half, rounding up, which I think is what West Newbury does and some of the others.
That would be the simplest way, that's the simplest solution, certainly.
Leslie, what are your thoughts in following this thread that's being projected?
Excuse me. I think the simplicity that you just presented makes the most sense. And not being, and excluding the trust, I think, would probably make the most sense in lieu of, to have a developer be on board for affordable housing. So we can also meet our goals in a more timely manner. But I have a question about how does this, excuse me, how does this work as far as it's affordable housing, but if most developers are putting up, let's say, between 700,000 and million plus houses, how does that fall into affordable housing? Where do these developers come in as far as like a subdivision and be able to make an affordable housing unit that is in comparison to the other units that'll sit in the development?
So how does the big beautiful
basically,
house?
I'm trying to see how all of this is going to mesh together.
Yep, I'm going to let Martha kind of answer that question, because maybe there's a little more insight from that. What do you think, Martha?
Well, I think it's a good question because for developers, it always comes down to economic viability of a project. And, if they're in a situation where they're building four houses, but 3 of them are market rate and 1 is affordable, and they have to make them all essentially provide the same, the same amenities and look the same from the outside. I could see quite honestly that it could be a challenge, if we're starting with 25% of 4, but which isn't exactly your question, Leslie, but.
No,
What
but
if,
that just
yeah.
seems to be the way development seems to be working today.
I mean, the issue is that land costs are so high right now.
Mhm.
And, one question I have on this, which is kind of a corollary, is, what I've been told is that a town cannot require this, but can incentivize it. So that's something that I would want to follow up on. But, if there's an incentive to provide an affordable unit, that might make it a little bit more economically viable.
so we package in an incentive, but, I was just thinking that this, Leslie, as you brought up the question, so we have, a developer that wants to make, large, very attractive homes to make this a cost-effective venture. Does the developer make a carriage house, a smaller, house, on the entryway to the property or within the property, that can be very well designed, but, smaller footprint, and more in line of what we're trying to achieve, because, we're trying to get that, I don't know if I'm going to use the right terms here. The starter home, the step down home, the home for somebody that's been in this community that can't afford it any longer. That's older. Maybe we even when we were looking at other projects, we were looking at ADA accessibility being built into the affordable unit. So I think I want to try to, if we can, think broadly about how we might package this. And Martha, if it's an incentive, hey, why not? Sometimes incentives are even a better fruit to offer.
Accessory apartment or 2 families.
Right. Yeah. Emily was saying maybe an accessory apartment or 2 families, or, or maybe there is a density bonus, as in our OSRD that has a provision for affordable housing. So if somebody provides 1 affordable unit, they get a density bonus, or 2 affordable units, they get a larger density bonus.
Mm-hmm. So, Larry, did I understand correctly that if we have an incentive built in, then we would have a stronger position to, I don't want to use the word mandate, but have this the marching orders that a developer would follow?
I'm not quite sure I'm following you, Pete. I guess, I don't know. I'm kind of getting back to Leslie's point. People are putting up $700,000, $800,000 homes. How do you build an affordable home that is comparable, in quality and size? That's what 40B would require, for example.
Right.
But this really wouldn't be the parameters of 40B, would it, Martha?
Well, the income levels are.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, Emily, did any of the bylaws address sort of the quality of the affordable home?
Not that I
versus,
remember.
okay.
But nobody's going to want to put up $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 homes and then have a $300,000 home sitting in the middle of the subdivision.
Unless it's what Emily kind of suggested, which would be an accessory apartment or an accessory dwelling. The accessory dwelling would be less than a third of the primary dwelling, and not to exceed, was it 900 square feet, Martha?
Right, ours is 1,000.
1,000.
Yeah, I think the state the state thing is 900, but they're allowed to do that by right now if it's attached. or by special permit if it's detached. So we would have to look at that mechanism.
Mhm.
It could also be a slippery slope for the developer to include, let's say, well, how they used to refer to it as like the in-law apartment, and do people, the other, does that make it, profitable for the developer to have apartment dwelling? It would be an apartment dwelling within a multi-million-dollar development. Could that actually work? Would there be any mandate that requires who goes in, who has accessibility to the additional dwelling area within the main home?
We would have it driven by an economic standard. So that would be the requirement for the accessory dwelling. Martha, do we want to stay away from? Do we want to define it as a home, or do we want to define this as an apartment, or do we just leave it as a dwelling?
I don't know. I mean, my initial thought would be that it would be a home. It would be, another dwelling, a separate dwelling within the development, that's kind of the intention, as opposed to an accessory unit. We already have provisions for those.
Okay.
With an accessory unit, I don't know how you would control affordability anyway. I mean, it's not as a separate saleable unit,
It would get messy, wouldn't it, Larry?
Yeah, which is how the whole mechanism works. You're keeping that affordable, ideally in perpetuity. But you couldn't, unless you were talking about a condo, which I don't think is where we're going. There'd be no way to control that.
So let's keep this in the discussion of as a dwelling as opposed to an apartment, a home.
I think that's what the model calls for.
Okay.
A standalone unit.
Yeah, I think that's the intention.
Okay.
Well, I guess it's not for us to develop, a developer's project. If this is going to be our community standard, and if we have the ability to do this, and we need guidance from our council, and whether it's this and incentive, I would like to go ahead, Larry.
I mean, actually, the answer to Leslie's concern is a payment in lieu. But until we have a housing trust or some entity to take and manage that, then that's not an option.
Well, maybe before we throw out the payment in lieu idea completely, it would be worth having a discussion with council about how we might handle that.
Yeah, do we know, for example, would a housing trust require town meeting approval? Or is that something that could be? My guess is it does, but I don't really know that.
I would think so.
Yeah.
So to develop a trust, it would be, to get this approved, it would be a two-part approval, is what you're saying.
Basically, I think we're probably talking about 2 warrant articles. And then the other thing is, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be negative about all this, but I'm just trying to work through the practical applications here, practical problems. Then we gotta consider what the trust can do with any money or land, for example, that's donated for affordable housing. I don't think the town anytime in the near future is going to be in a position to become a real estate developer. So we have to have, find a way to use that money, for its intended purpose. And that comes down, I guess, to the limitations or the authority of the trust.
Right, and I think that's where a housing authority comes in, because then
Right.
they're managing all of that. And that, you know, that requires a dedicated staff person and
Yeah, that's a big
additional
deal.
resources.
Yeah. And in fact, in a lot of communities, elected members too.
Martha, one time we had a discussion with MVPC with this concept, and I don't remember where it ended up, you know, with a housing authority under the auspices for MVPC or partnering with an entity, and I forget the players that were in that discussion. Do you recall that at all?
Well, that would have been, I think, Nate from MVPC and Damon and you and I were having that discussion.
Yeah. Do you remember the confines of that discussion?
I don't
Yeah.
really specifically about a housing authority or housing trust.
Yeah, it was just for board members. It was, you know, we had a sit down with a representative from MVPC, and at the time, a select board representative, Damon, and myself, and Martha, and we were trying to kick around different ways of how we might be able to, you know, try to handle this this concept. And one was to have a housing authority, kind of, you know, like a combined housing authority or regional housing authority for towns like ours that might not have the opportunity to have staff or resources to oversee that. So, you know, if there was like an interest from West Newbury and, you know, another town, Raleigh or something like that, where we can combine our efforts to form a housing authority that would oversee this sort of stuff. That was more of a long-term conceptual plan. So we might have to do this in pieces, Larry, you know, as separate warrant articles, you know, to get to where we want to be. And I hope it wouldn't scare off a developer, you know, coming into the community. But at the same point, we need to do something to change our numbers and to help our community to have affordable housing. You know, we're fortunate that we have the accessory dwelling bylaw. We're, you know, a unique community in doing that initially, but this is going the next step.
To reach 10%, to try and reach the 10% goal.
Right,
Yeah.
threshold.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult with inclusionary housing because, you know, for each, even if it were, you know, 1-to-3 ratio, for every 3 market rate, we get 1 affordable, you know, that's not going to get us very far towards our 10%. We still need to look at other mechanisms, but this is, you know, this is certainly a first step in trying to provide some. And right now, the only affordable housing we have are the 3 elderly housing complexes. We don't have any, you know, any single family homes.
No, it'd be a great start.
So let's kind of summarize where we're at with the thought process. Are we comfortable with the threshold? Do we want the threshold to be 3 or the threshold to be 4 for activation? Yeah.
Actually, if I may, I'd be sort of interested in talking with Leah over in West Newbury to see how that has been working for them. My one concern really is that, you know, depending on how the bylaw is structured, with having a very low trigger, you know, just thinking about the economic viability for the developer, you know, we want to make this something that people will embrace, as opposed to really balking at. And the lower the threshold, the lower the trigger, you know, I think the more economically challenged it gets to be. So I'd really like to talk to Leah to see kind of what their experience has been with having, you know, having the number be 3. And also how they have gone about handling the payments in lieu.
Well, they have a housing authority. In fact, they have public housing, if I'm not mistaken.
West Newbury does?
I think so, yeah. Pretty sure they do.
Okay.
So that makes it easier. I mean, they have a built-in mechanism to handle those.
I think actually West Newbury and Newburyport have combined housing authority. I may be incorrect on that, but
I don't think
think
they're
they were-
combined, Woody, but
I think they work together a lot anyways. I don't know, I may be mistaken, but
check with, we can do a little bit more research. Emily, maybe we reach out to West Newbury, see how it's been working for them, and see what they've done in payment with the approach of payment in lieu and how they handled that. So that, and the other communities that, did you have any conversations, Leslie, or Emily, with these bylaws discussions, or were these just pulled from existing data? Did you have any discussions with any communities by chance?
No, I just was looking at the zoning, their zoning.
So yeah, Martha, I think the thought of having a conversation or two to see how it's worked makes sense. And then that'll give us direction or a little bit of insight to what the potholes have been in the process that maybe they haven't covered, they have, come across. But if we could find what that number would be where it's economically viable for a developer to do something like this. And the big thing I think, Martha, is like the infrastructure, right? If we talk about somebody putting a road down and all that sort of stuff, that's going to be rate limiting. But if it's a common driveway that this can flow off of, does that make sense?
Well, I think, you're looking at the infrastructure no matter what. You're looking at the road, you're looking at the installation of utilities. And that's got some amount of cost, which obviously the developer is going to try to recoup through selling the lots or selling lots with houses. And it really kind of goes back to the cost of land as to what the magic number is that's going to make it viable for a developer.
Does this fit better with an OSRD model?
And we've already got it built into the OSRD, and nobody has ever taken advantage of that option for density.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Would this apply to like OSRD if you?
The mechanism's already in the OSRD, so I don't know that it would apply as a separate thing.
Yes, but I guess what I'm saying is sort of, it's here, what we've seen, it sort of looks like it's required. So would that be if we did 20%, 5%, would that 25% apply to an OSRD?
An OSRD.
It might, or you could make it too.
Right, in addition to a conventional subdivision.
Yeah. Might be more viable in an OSRD.
Maybe with reduced infrastructure.
Larry, thoughts?
No. I'm sorry, I was just making some notes and I lost the thread of that last.
I was hoping you had a solution that you were mapping it all out there and you're going to say, well, here it is.
No, I'm just, I was just making some notes, sorry. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, we were saying, this concept and, we have something within the OSRD, but does this model fit better for that?
Oh, and in other words, would it be, you're suggesting maybe we could look at strengthening the OSRD requirement for affordable housing and as a different approach?
Right. Or as an approach, in addition.
I think anything's on the table, sure. I don't think it matters how we get there as long as we get there. That said, I have no other
Okay, so Martha,
insight into it.
thoughts? Our next action, where are we?
Well, I think, maybe just based on the discussion, what we could do is start with, start with the trigger that was suggested of 4. And start with having it, having it be a unit as opposed to payment, and kind of see how far we can get with that, but at the same time do some research on housing trusts and housing authorities and mechanisms for dealing with payments or donations of land. I mean, if a developer wanted to donate a piece of land to us, that would be great, because potentially that could then be something we could issue an RFP for, a nonprofit affordable housing developer to do that.
I think we'd have to have parameters around the type of land it was.
Yes. Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It can't be all wetlands. Obviously it has to be a developable parcel.
It's a starting point, and I think we have at least a discussion taking place. So let's kind of work on these thoughts. We'll do a little bit more research and some conversations, maybe see what the council's thought is, and then we could report this back to the board as to where we're at, and then maybe in a few weeks, you think we could revisit this, Martha? Is that realistic?
Yeah, I think so. Either 2 weeks or else right after the new year, and come back to it. I know we're working on a tight time frame. I think what I would suggest, if everybody hasn't had a chance to do it, is review the model bylaw that Emily sent along with the other ones. And, I think the model bylaw would be a starting point, but then see if there are provisions in some of the other bylaws that we might want to incorporate if they're not already. And I will also ask town council if she has a model that she would recommend that we take a look at.
Good. All right. Well, from a work group perspective, I think we've had a good conversation. Leslie, any thoughts before we wrap up?
Okay.
Okay. Woody, any other thoughts?
No, not right now. I need to think about some of this, and we should. I like the idea of seeing what council has for a model bylaw on.
Larry, any other closing thoughts?
No, I don't have anything to add.
All right. Emily, any other thoughts?
No.
Okay. Well, I think this has been a helpful, discussion for the work group to engage in, and let's see where we come back in a couple of weeks, and we can go from there. All set?
Okay.
Good.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Everyone, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and trying to get to this. Thank you. Have a great day.
Do we
All right.
want to adjourn?
Okay.
Oh, please. I would thank you, Larry. I saw you raising your hand.
I'll move to adjourn.
And is there a second to that?
Second.
Oh, is there any discussion on this motion? Discussion on the motion, Larry.
No.
Discussion, Woody?
None.
Discussion, Leslie?
No.
Okay, great. How do you vote, Larry?
Yes.
Thank you. How do you vote, Woody?
Yes.
Thank you. Leslie, and how do you vote?
Yes.
Wonderful. Chairs in favor as well. Great. Thanks very much, everybody.
All
Enjoy
right.
the day.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.